Craic is back, my friends. How are you all doing? Did you have a happy Halloween? Did you eat lots of candy? That's what you guys call it, right? Candy. We call them sweets. Candy. You have it your way. What a fantastic time of year. One of my favourite times of year, actually. I love Halloween. Unfortunately, I was drafted in to work as the children of Blanchardstown were coming to our doors looking for their beautiful treats. New York Rick cracks the whip, demands I'm on the boys in the back, and what a pleasure it was to make my debut. UFC Edmonton is tomorrow. ArielHelwani all week. Yay, Canada. Won't stop about it. He's absolutely buzzing. Mike Malott with a great appearance on the Craic. On the ArielHelwani show, should I say, during the week. Actually very excited for his fight. I'm also excited for Moreno v Albazi, Nami Yunus v Blanchfield, the Black Beast v Diniz. But most excited for a man that will be joining us later on in the show, Mr. Jack Shore, as he takes on Youssef Zalal. It's on the undercard, but it's an absolute banger of a fight. Jack Shore, an underdog. I mean, I don't know how long it's been since Jack Shore has been an underdog. This guy is a champion ever since he was a teenager. First with IMAF in the amateurs. Then he goes to Cage Warriors. Wins the bantamweight title there. He goes to the UFC. Has an amazing run at bantamweight there. Loses to Ricky Simone as he's getting into the kind of title mix in that situation. Goes to featherweight. Has the fight with Makwan Amirkhani. And if you remember, one of the great moments in UK MMA is when Jack Shore wins that fight. His dad, Shaky Shore, obviously his head coach, is in his corner and he calls out a head kick, I believe it was. It kind of begins this finishing sequence for Jack, and then Jack gets on the mic and talks about his father's cancer diagnosis. Thank God Richard is now in remission. He's doing great. He is also going to be on the show. Jack and Richard. I mean, who gets this stuff? Me. That's who. So absolutely buzzing for you to hear what those boys have to say. But Jack Shore is an underdog. It got me thinking. Thinking about the guests we've had on the video edition of the Craic. Paul Hughes was the first one. Went in against AJ McKee. Nobody gave him a chance. And what happened there? Paul Hughes wins the fight. Next guest, Lerone Murphy v Dan Ige. Lerone, in fairness, he was the favourite going into that fight. But a lot of people were like, oh, people are sleeping on Dan Ige. I saw you in the comments when we put out all our picks. Should have picked Ige, Petesy, all this stuff. Lerone survives a very tough first round with Ige, the power puncher, and wins the fight. So basically what I'm getting to is, never mind the fact that I'm batting 500 on my underdog picks, every guest that has appeared on the video edition of the Craic is a winner. Am I jinxing this? Who knows? Funnily enough, Jack Shore, who I mentioned already, he is both on the Edmonton card and he is an underdog. So maybe he can get us back to winning ways with the underdog of the week. Who knows? I'll tell you at the back of the show if he is that guy. And maybe he can continue in the form of all winning guests on the Craic. Who knows? A lot has happened since last week. Obviously, 308 came and went. Ilia Topuria becomes one of the biggest stars in the UFC's books, which we had a feeling would happen, let's be honest. Chimaev, another European star. I mean, it's all popping off over here. Bilal Muhammad out of his fight. Who's going to replace him? Will it be my boy Ian Gary? Will it be Jack Della Maddalena? Will it be Leon Edwards? Who knows? December, not so far away though, so we'll have to see what they do there. Before we talk to Jack Shore, I saw the comments. All of you want the man in the hat, the legendary journalist, the great feature writer, Chuck Mindenhall back on the Craic. So guess what? He's here, ladies and gentlemen. If you have not seen it, he has wrote an absolutely brilliant feature on the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali v George Foreman. It has to be the most iconic fight of all time. Ever since I'm a kid, I know about this fight. I know about the rope-a-dope. I know everybody was writing off Ali's chances. Of course, he wins in the 8th round. Spectacular fight. Foreman, the immovable object, down by Ali, a man who was considered to be walking to the gallows that night in Kinshasa, Zaire. I can't think of a fight that has more cultural resonance. And there's lots of crossover here, in terms of today's sport. When you think about Mubatu, the dictator, essentially buying that event so it would happen in Zaire and appeal to the world and show Zaire as this brilliant country. The entertainers that were there, like BB King, James Brown, a big concert beforehand. The cultural imprint on boxing is very pronounced still to this day. So anyway, Chuck will say a lot better things about it than me. He's far better with words. So let's get over to the man in the hat, my good friend and one of the greatest feature writers of all time, Chuck Mindenhall. I have been inundated with comments on all these episodes. When is Chuck coming back on? When is he coming on? You better get Chuck on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I've delivered. I just keep on delivering. Call me the postman, Chuck Mindenhall, because here he is, one of the greatest feature writers of all time, a man who has wrote a brilliant piece about the subject we're going to discuss now, which is the Rumble in the Jungle, the most iconic fight of all time. Chuck, welcome back to the show, first of all. A pleasure as always, my good friend.
Make sure to send the check to my home address this time, not the P.O. box. Thank you, Petesy. No, it's great to be back, man. This is my favorite. This is my favorite show right now. All right, the Craic is my favorite show. I feel very comfortable here. You're a good host. Thank you.
You're a crackhead?
Yes, I think that's what. Yes, that's how you can interpret that.
Fantastic. This article, like, there's something about this fight. It's not just with me; it's with everyone that has an interest in fights. This is something we were talking about before we went live. Like every bit of this fight seems to have a bit of poetry to it. It's like fine art. It isn't even like a fight. All of the story surrounding it, of course, it happened in Kinshasa, Zaire in 1974, 50th anniversary, as we already said. This is the dumbest question I've ever asked, but I've got to ask it. What is it about this fight, Chuck Mindenhall? What is it about this fight?
Man, and this is I spoke to, you're mentioning the article that I wrote this week. I spoke to Jerry Eisenberg, who is a great chronicler of the heavyweight, that golden era of heavyweights back in the 70s and 80s, and even before in the 60s, Liston and all those guys. Like he really had the beat on it. He was there. I think one of the reasons that it stood the test of time is that it had such great chroniclers. It had the eyes of the world were on it. I think it's speculated that there were 1 billion people that watched this fight. There were 60,000 on hand. It was such an exotic adventure for boxing, right? Like it's in the heart of Africa. There were these storylines which you knew Muhammad Ali, as a firebrand in the boxing world, was going to make the most of. Like he was able to go out there, celebrate it. The fight was actually backed up 6 weeks. It was supposed to happen in September and it ended up getting postponed due to an injury. And, James Brown and this whole festival took place in the time it was supposed to have happened. So there was this whole preamble of setting the vibe, the tone, man. And I think that it just captivated. And I think the chroniclers, and this is from my perspective as a writer, I'm not sure I would be writing about fighting, as much as I did, or I wouldn't have had the inclination if it weren't for guys like Norman Mailer writing The Fight, or George Plimpton and his kind of like takes on everything, and Eisenberg, guys like that who were there. It should have been Hunter S. Thompson as well, but I think he got in a drug haze at the swimming pool, never wrote anything.
That's my guy.
But yeah, so it's like, I think it's the chroniclers themselves, but that's what preserved it. In real time, you're talking about one of the greatest underdogs who the world's eyes were on him, going against one of the deadliest, scariest men on the planet at the time. He was only, I think, 24 years old at that time, had never been beaten, had looked absolutely devastating. The call was already famous. Down goes Frazier. This guy was like, it's very similar in a weird way to the Holloway Topuria fight that just happened, because you had a guy who's 32 years old. That's how old Ali was going into this fight, a former champion, trying to reclaim kind of like this glory, and the world kind of waiting for it. Like, can he do this? Like, this is one hurdle too many, like with Topuria. But I think Foreman was like that times, magnitude of 10, because he's a heavyweight. And we saw the result, I think. And then you get the rope-a-dope, you plug all the little mythologies that are going on around it, and it had all the makings of just one of the great stories in the fight game, man.
You mentioned like the chroniclers, the great writers. You mentioned Norman Mailer, The Fight. I used to read that book on every trip to Vegas.
Yeah.
Before I went to cover McGregor, I was like, I'm in a
Funny.
moment like this. Of course,
Yeah,
I was
man.
never in a moment like that. But
Aldo was close, man.
yeah, I suppose. But then there was When We Were Kings. That when you see it, and I can remember watching this as a child. Well, not as a child. I was probably a young preteen, and my uncle showed it to me, and being absolutely bewildered by it. This romanticism we have around the journalism of that time, and the romantic feelings about fighting that they provoke. Like, what is it about that generation? Because we talk about this stuff all the time. You know, the book I constantly used to mention on the Ring Around May at the
Yeah.
fights with all of those chronicles. What is it about that time, and why? How did we get all these brilliant writers who could have wrote about absolutely anything, who were writing about absolutely
Yeah, they did.
anything,
Yeah.
fixated on the fight game?
It's an interesting question, man. And I think in a strange roundabout sense, some of them looked like they might have thought they were slightly slumming it to be covering the fights originally. And I think that guys like AJ Liebling, who are like earlier, the kind of predecessors to the whole kind of that now the golden era of Penn, I guess, with the guys like Mailer and all those guys who came along and they kind of, dipped their toes in the fight game. It was a time when literary things mattered. I think it was at the high point. 70s were like a very high point in my mind for good literature anyway. Like there are a ton of good books, a lot of really good movies that are way darker by today's standards because they went in for a more of a literary feel. And I think that was the key, like they were trying to tell the truth. They weren't afraid to mythologize. They weren't afraid to do these things, but they were trying to find the truth. They were not trying to make friends with their subject matters. They were incendiary. I just think that you look back on that time period and it kind of echoes what was going on with those heavyweights. But with those heavyweights, the exact same array of them, Ken Norton, Liston, take any of them, any of the guys from the 70s, like and plug them into today's world of social media, would it have seemed as romantic? What would the coverage be? And obviously it wouldn't. So I think that just the coverage is what kind of solidified it in the minds of all of us who can't fathom that much great mind energy onto singular events. It's just crazy, man. But I really love it, and obviously that's where I came from. Like you come from this type of thing where you're like, I want to do that. I want to I want to capture things for posterity, and that's kind of like I guess how I've alighted on this journey.
Well, thank you to all of your predecessors for getting you here, Chuck Mindenhall. Jerry Eisenberg is 94.
94.
And you're interviewing him, and I don't want to ruin the ending of it, but it's a kind of a beautiful ending because he still has that romantic eye on boxing. Like it's such a beautiful scene he paints in the parting note of that article of that piece you wrote. What was it like to speak to him? Like, can you still see the shimmer in his eye when he's recalling those nights in Zaire?
The truth is, he's 94. I wasn't sure what to expect. To be honest, man, when you're dealing in like, guys in their 90s, even 80s, right? Like you're like, I hope um that they're with it. I hope that they're completely what I've always known, about them, that they're just this rich source of history that you can tap into. They're still living there, they're still telling the stories. And he was that, man. And it was crazy to listen to those stories. I was telling you just before we started taping, I'll reiterate it here. I had I had set up a Zoom, which was like 45 minutes, and I'm like, that should be plenty. I'm probably going to get half an hour or less. But he was mid-story at the 45-minute mark, and it just cut off, and I felt so bad. I was like, oh, he's talking about this whole listing thing that went on with Ollie and everything. I was like, listen, I was like, I could listen to the guy for hours. Obviously, like he's got stories and stories and stories, stories within stories and stories within those. It just keeps going, and but it was just like you would expect. Like the guy still holds. I feel like he could still sit down right now and write something that would blow our socks off, man, because he's that good. He's that with it. He was recalling things, you know, within that fight that I was just like, how do you keep all these little details, like all the details? Like, I can't remember. You could ask me about a fight that happened in 2021, and I'd be like, I watched it, but I don't know. I wouldn't remember anything. So, um, amazing. It was a great experience, man. I felt very lucky to talk to him.
Yeah, I'm sure you are fanboying out. Like I've heard you and Ariel talk about Jerry so much over the years. I've read it
Oh yeah.
myself, but you boys are absolute fanboys. Um, One thing he said, and I've been thinking about it since I read the article, and it's true, but it also feels like almost dirty to say it, is that this wasn't a great fight. And I tell you what that did to me when I read that line from him. I remember it was either my granddad, God rest his soul, or my dad, and I think it was the 30th anniversary of this fight, and they were showing it on BBC, so I was like 7 or 8, and I was watching this fight and not impressed by like what I'm
Yeah.
watching. And my
Right.
dad or my granddad, I can't remember which one it was like telling me all these stories around the fight. But I'm a child, so I'm just watching what's on the screen going, what are you talking about? The ending, of course, is one of the most spectacular things you'll ever
Sure.
see. But do you agree with that statement? Have you gone back and watched the full 8 rounds? And do you think it's accurate what Jerry said?
Well, I think there was so this is like this is kind of a two-parter because how did it seem in real time versus how is it matured in the eyes of like people who look back on it, like what can they see a different fight, you know? I think as it was happening, it probably did not, it's probably seemed anticlimactic because you had a guy basically leaning on the ropes, just getting thudded to the body and just kind of talking and stuff, but not doing much. And you get another guy who's just, you know, driving forward like he doesn't have, like just on animal instinct almost, just trying to like put him away, pulverize him on those ropes. There wasn't much of a theatrical sense to it until the end. And then it becomes like, oh my God, what did we just see? Right. But this is all I wasn't watching it live, you know, I mean, it's way too long ago. So it's like one of those things you're like, you, you know, you look back on it and you're like, you knowing the outcome of it changes how you might see it. And also just the whole rope a dope thing and the backdrop being what it is and everything. You watch it with a certain kind of romance now. It seems more interesting because you know the ending. And I think, but in real time, I do think that probably as people were watching it, it wasn't a good fight. Like when he mentioned it, you know, if this were just in Cincinnati or New York or someplace regular, I would have probably walked out. And I was like, that's crazy, you know? And I think that that's kind of a general sentiment. Like, honestly, I think a lot of people felt very similar about it who were at the fight. So it's a very strange thing in how it's kind of, you know, been deified over the years and how people see it now.
One thing that always strikes me and the resonance of this fight, like you could talk for days about it, and we'll try to hit as many as we can here, but the context of this fight is so important. And I'm not talking about the geographical location in Zaire. I'm talking about the idea that Ali is headed for demise that night. Like it
Yeah.
seemed like the whole world feared what they were about to see, like to see him get bludgeoned by Foreman. And in When We Were Kings, you see Cosell, who's a great friend of his, this reporter that,
Yeah.
you know, he has this amazing relationship with, and you can see it in their interviews. And he's saying this is the end of Muhammad Ali before he's even got on the plane to
It's
Zaire for that
crazy.
initial date in September.
Hell of
You
a
also,
proclamation.
yeah, you also have George Plimpton saying it felt like we were sending him off to the gallows,
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali. In every recital of this tale, and I say recital because it does feel like a poem every fucking time one of these guys
Yeah.
talks about it. The world gave this guy no hope at all. So when I thought about that, I was thinking about when we get a pick wrong, right? Like Poirier and Saint Denis, and everyone's going, "Oh, how the fuck did you guys do that?" Like they're missing the point. If this was not the context of this fight, the magic is gone,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly right. Yes. Exactly right. And you know, man, I think that that is that's really this is where the greatest thing, you know, intervenes, where the greatest whoever was, right? Like this is a guy, like you think about the context, it really matters in this case because, you know, he was banished from boxing for 3.5 years for the whole drafting. People hated him at one point of his career. I think when he came up, you know, the Louisville Lip, Cassius Clay, always barking. He was the guy who showed up at Sun, you know, in Vegas with Sonny Liston and was like barking a blue streak, and people are like, "Who is this? This guy's like, you know, treading on the sanctity of this game, even though it's like boxing, right? Doesn't have much sanctity in terms of like all those periphery, but he was just playing a different game." And you know, you go through all of that, and you get to 1974, 32 years old, and people did think that he was good. I think that it was more of a testament of George Foreman, like being as scary as he was, you know, like I can remember like one of the great lines was Norman Mailer basically saying something along the lines of the room where they were waiting to walk out, you know, they're in the locker room, whatever it is, had the feel and the energy of like a you know, waiting room at a hospital where they're waiting on news of an operation. that's going on of a loved one. I was like, what a great. I mean, if that doesn't kind of paint the picture of exactly how dire it seemed, and if you've seen any of the subsequent videos like that
Seen it.
came out, like where he's just like, guys, why is everybody so scared? What's going on? Let's go dance. We're gonna dance. He's like, he's just, it's, I mean, it's amazing. It just packs so neatly into this aura that he has, right? And I think it gives rise to any underdog story. Like you can find anything you want in that whole fight, in that whole event, anything you want. Even today, and we're dealing with putting our minds around Saudi Arabia and like kind of the sports washing and all this stuff. Well, this was a dictator run country of Zaire, Mobutu, and like human rights, like he's violating all this stuff. This is a true dictatorship that they were going into. There were guys with machine guns, at the entrances and things like that. They had a huge poster in the stadium of him, like a huge banner of his face. I mean, it's just, you look at all of that and you think, my God, this couldn't happen. But in some ways, there's little echoes of it all over the place, and I think it's still relevant to this day, like for those reasons.
Yeah, that was what I was coming to next. The resonance in that regard. This is essentially sports washing what we were saying happen here. Um, as far as I know, Don King had promised Foreman and Ali a purse of 5 million, but he had no idea where he's getting it from.
Right.
And I think eventually other parties convinced Mobutu this would be a great way to showcase Zaire
Yeah,
to
they were
the
pulling
world.
money from all over the place, even Libya, like
Yeah,
all kinds of different, kinds of
Gaddafi was
different.
involved. That's right. Well,
I
rumored
know.
to be
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
Crazy. Mela describes Mobutu, I believe it's in the fight, as an African Stalin, and he talks about the soccer pitch, which you reference in your article. It used to detain thousands of people underneath it. They used to use it as a prison, and before they had this influx of people from the Western world going to Zaire, there began to be problems with people coming from different parts of the world. They began to rob them. So what Mobutu did was, according to Mailer, he rounded up the 1,000 worst criminals in
Mhm.
Zaire. He put them into these detention cells where the fight was going to be held whenever after, and he took 100 of them out and killed them in front of everyone, so they could see this is what will
So
happen
crazy.
to you if you mess with the tourists and the influx of media, pop stars, everything like that come in here. Um,
Can you imagine? Can you imagine
could you
this
imagine
today?
covering this? Could you imagine
I
covering
know.
this?
Well, it would become. I mean, obviously, you had like these great literary figures who 100% delved into all of this.
Oh yeah,
But in today's world, with the deadlines and social media, and you just have to be posting little gifts. I mean, like, this would be a whole different feel.
it
Trying
would
to
just be a
cover
5 second
the
clip. Yeah.
gravity of this. I know. It's like, and you would have that, you would have those people that are like, why aren't you talking about the dictatorship? And you'd be like, man, I don't have, like, how am I supposed to ladle all this out? Like, there's too much to unfold here.
There's so much. There's so much in this fight. You mentioned the entertainment thing. Look, we talked about like how you can draw a line from this to Saudi and all that stuff as well. Of course you can. As well, the entertainment side of it, like these gigs they were putting on, James Brown, BB King, like
Oh my
massive
God. I
thousands
loved it.
upon thousands of people here. And
Yeah.
that's just to name a few of the artists that were there. We can see that today as well. Like if like think about these concerts that we see at every Saudi event.
Eminem. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it
Well,
always
I
seems
guess the
so
Saudi
relevant.
event he performed in was LA, but yes, you're right. I mean, they have the exact same thing. They're doing the exact
It
same
was
thing, like
Missy
big
Elliott the other
concerts.
week.
Yeah. I know. Like Affliction had Megadeth, way back in the day. Everybody's been trying this for a while. I still don't really. That thing, the whole thing with the Rumble in the Jungle was, it was supposed to be like more of like a festival, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like a several day festival leading to the fight, and that's kind of a cool idea in a weird, like just if you could pull that off. But it's certainly, I feel like some of these guys, like obviously the UFC, we cover most of the UFC and MMA, like they travel all over the place. But in terms of just strictly exotic locations where you're like just really crazy places, there aren't too many of them. They're going to mostly Sydney, Australia, or you know what I mean? They're going
Yeah.
to Rio. They're not really going into the interior of Africa, which just like, I guess that part of the adventure is just crazy on its own, Just like that whole visual or imagining what that must have been like.
Yeah, there's a lot of again just this great journalism written about the location. And have you ever heard Plimpton tell the story about when he went to visit a local village. I think it was before. I think the fight had just been postponed, right? So Foreman gets cut, and the journalists decide to stay there, right? Because they're like, well, everyone is staying here. We may as well stay here. And I believe Plimpton went to a nearby like village. You're talking African village in Central
Yeah,
Africa. I mean, um, a very
that's right.
different landscape than he's used to, and he's told by an elder that a succubus is going to touch George Foreman and it's going to take his soul. And apparently that's what Plimpton said to the other writers on the eighth round
Wow.
when Ali spins him and he starts cracking him.
Wow.
Plimpton turns around to the rest of them, going, "It's a succubus! It's a succubus!" Because he's obviously coming back to the
Wow.
hotel or
I
whatever.
forgot that. I do remember that. I also remember him saying, I mean, this is what's great, right? Like you can, it's like all the color that came out of this,
Yes.
and all these stories. But I remember Plimpton was saying that Archie Moore, who was in Foreman's corner, and at this point, like, and this was another Eisenberg thing where he was saying like they were like the three loneliest men on the planet, him and his cornerman, because everybody had turned against them. They're all chanting, for Ali to kill him and all this stuff. And he was saying that Archie Moore, like going back to your original point about the context and how people felt, the kind of sense of dread. Like he was saying that Archie Moore was in the back before they went out praying for Ali's life. This is a guy in Foreman's corner praying for his life, like just praying that he didn't get punished to that extent. I was just like, it's just crazy, like that whole thing, right? The Plimpton, and all of them are slightly different than each other, which is great. Like the Plimpton, all of the Plimpton stuff that came out of it, the Norman Mailer stuff that came out of it, and obviously like guys like Eisenberg, they all had kind of different takes on it a little bit. So it just paints such a great picture.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Um, I wanted to ask you about one of the conspiracy theories. Um,
All right.
the fight was supposed to happen in September. Foreman gets cut. You're mentioning that line about them being the loneliest people in the world because all of Zaire and the world, it feels, wants Ali, the 4-1 underdog, to win.
Yeah.
Do you think that prolonging Foreman's stay in that environment in Zaire, where Ali is essentially lifted up as a king, that extra 5 weeks he
Yes.
has to spend there, do you think that messed with him mentally before he went into that fight?
Foreman.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And I was this is actually it couldn't make the article because Eisenberg talked for 45 minutes, and I was like, you had to just kind of take what you could like fit into the relevancy of the piece, whatever the essential ore was. I was like, all right, I got. But he was talking about one of the things he talks about, and I think he even wrote about this in the chapter dealing with the Rumble in the Jungle in his book, Once There Were Giants, that Ali was planting those seeds throughout the whole thing. He basically told the authorities that, hey, George is going to run now. Now that there's time, he's going to run. So they stationed guards like outside of his room, like outside of the hotel, taking it sort of literally and turning it into this thing. But this whole thing about George Foreman um wanting to flee,
A hostage
just stuff like
situation.
that. Yeah. And I'm like, I think that his theory, is that he was thoroughly in George Foreman's head by the time. And I think that, that extra time, that extra whatever it was, 6 weeks is why, he was a very, like, at the time, you've read about him, seeing him very serious, quiet, the bib overalls, just a very, like, a Texas dude who'd seen some weird stuff growing up, been involved in weird stuff. But I think that he wasn't sophisticated in the sense of like dealing with Ali for that amount of time with him in your crosshairs, and then him playing the mental games he did. Um, yeah, I think that he was affected, man. Over that course of time, I 100%.
The fight essentially ruined him for decades. And then he came back, of course, and wins the heavyweight title as the oldest heavyweight champion ever.
That's you bring up a great point. The craziest thing is that it's aged in perfect ways, right? This fight has aged. George Foreman, over the course of 28 years, almost 30 years, in two different stints where he was basically a champion, right? Like he fights, he becomes a champion, only got knocked out once, fighting the best over the course of that time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know he
Yeah.
had that huge gap, but then he returns as an old man, basically, and still lays waste to guys who are way younger than him and strong and all that stuff. Only got knocked out that one time out of all of that. Only 5 losses, but the others were decisions. I'm like, isn't that crazy? Like,
That
that's
is
just one of those
insane.
things you're like, it just ages in such perfect ways for Ali and this figure that we've kind of made. Like, what did Eisenberg say? He's a statue that's been built. like in the face of reality or something along those lines. Like we've erected this thing, but at the same time, it's hard to not see him that way at times, because so many of the things aged that way for him.
Yeah. I've got two more for you, Chuck, and
All right.
I could talk to you about this all
I
day,
know.
honestly.
Call
Um,
Jerry.
yeah, I should. I've got a Zoom membership. It won't run out here, it'll be perfect.
Yeah, I need to get one of those. I need to get one of those. I was trying to do that like at the very end. I'm like, nope, I can't. I can't. It's like it's
Pretty.
impossible. Yeah.
Um, is the genius of Ali's fight in the mental warfare, or is it in the rope a dope? Like, what do you put more weight on here? Because it's actually unbelievable
Man.
to watch this guy when everyone is nearly in tears talking about the idea of this fight happening. His
Yeah.
confidence. He has some of his best lines. It's the wrestle an alligator stuff. It's I'm so bad I make medicine sick. All that stuff is from the press conferences in this fight. He's magic. So what is it? Like what do you put more weight behind? His mental majesty or his punching prowess?
It's just such a cop out, but it's got to be a combo. I think that honestly, like this is something I like as I watch it. I do believe he figured it out. I don't think he went in there thinking, "I'll lay on the ropes. I'll lay on the ropes." And as Mailer said, kind of absorb whatever these punches are and send them through the ropes, send the vibrations through the ropes, send it down through the turnbuckles. Like I'm gonna absorb and put the share of the brunt of the punches through the whole ring. I'm not gonna take. Now you could say that was very poetic. This is all very good, but I do think that it was a revelation within this fight. I don't think that he went in there with the intention of doing that. I think it was a revelation that happened. He was like, you know what? I could go back here, let him punch himself out a little bit, and just when the time comes, I'll spring into life and we'll have our offense. And I think that he wasn't getting hurt. In fact, he was talking, which goes into your other point here, saying, "Is that all you got, George? Is that all you got?" And I think after the seventh round, it's like that famous thing where he's like, Foreman was basically saying that he was walking back to his round and saying to himself, "Yeah, that's all I've got. That's that's all I've got. I don't have any more." Um, and I mean those types of things are just crazy. But I think that the rope a dope thing has taken on a life of its own. It's not the greatest thing to watch, but it was so effective. And Ollie wasn't about to be like, he wasn't about to take, he wasn't about to diminish whatever people wanted to believe about it. So he let people believe what they wanted. But I do think it was more of a revelation in the fight that he could get by with it. But it goes hand in hand, right? It goes hand in hand with everything. Every single thing that he does, whether it's him planting seeds, kind of talking. The reason we loved Conor McGregor is because you could make these connections to Ali, that he was winning a mental game before he ever stepped in there to make the fight, right? Like that he was beating Jose Aldo before Jose Aldo even got his shoes off. You know what I mean? Like he was already beating him, and I think that that's true of Ali. Like you can find examples of this all the way down the line. What's my name? That fight. The whole thing. It's just you can find examples of this in almost every one of his fights if you really go and look at them.
I've got an even harder one with you to
Okay,
finish off this topic.
you start. This is good. We've gotten more sophisticated because you said the dumbest question you've ever
Yeah,
asked. Now we're at the hardest. All right, here we go.
yeah, this is the way I planned it out. Um, and this is a very difficult question because I was pondering it myself before I talked to you. What is Muhammad Ali without the Rumble in the Jungle?
Oh God, man.
Because he already accomplished so much. Like this guy is,
I don't
but
know, man.
you know,
He had accomplished so much. The fight of the century in '71 was already the high point of anybody's career. I mean, that was the hottest ticket, I think, in sports of the century. Like
Frank
it was
Sinatra
just
had
Frank
to get a
Sinatra was there, like, yeah.
photographer
And I
credential.
mean,
Yeah.
the who's who that was there was so ridiculous. The ticket prices, I really don't think that the universe paid attention to one singular event like they did that one until maybe Rumble in the Jungle. And then Thriller Manila, like afterwards, probably takes on its greatest import because of this, right? Like
Yeah.
then you get the trilogy fight. It's in Manila again. The whole mental warfare. These guys are the greatest rivals. They become the greatest rivals over the course of time. Maybe in sports, it's right up there with any rivalry that you can point out. And it's such a hinge piece. This particular fight, and there was so much to it. Him trying to regain the title, him going up against Foreman, who seemed invincible. Um, the setting. Everything we've kind of gone through. I just don't know. It's almost impossible to imagine how his career would have played out if that didn't happen. It's like I feel like he still would have been a legendary figure. I feel like, but I don't know if it would have reached these proportions. It's a 3-part thing in a strange way. With the 3 fights we just mentioned. And what each one of them symbolized and what they've come to symbolize over the course of time. And this one was so pivotal for that, So I'm not sure where he'd be, honestly, man.
I just want to get drunk with you and watch When We Were Kings the next time we see
Oh
each other.
God!
We
All
got
right,
do
next
that.
time we're doing it. We're doing it.
Any thoughts on Bilal Muhammad before you go? I mean, he's out at 310 as we found out Thursday.
God.
Ian
I
Gary
want
going
to
to get the
see.
slot, or is your boy from
Do
Danbury,
you think
Pineda,
so?
coming in? Well,
Pereira.
yeah,
I
unless
don't think
Pereira's
it's gonna be.
taking
If it's Pereira, I mean they don't like Shavkat, or maybe it's vice versa. I'm not sure at this point. Shavkat's his own like crazy thing. It's a bummer, man, because I was looking forward to this, weren't you? I mean, this is one of those weird ones that I'm like, I want Shavkat getting he's such a quiet, weird, enigmatic fellow, but he's going to get the shot. He's been so dominant, and Bilal kind of surprising everybody. Like, this might actually be like a really crazy fight. I don't know what they do. Ian Gary wouldn't be a bad. I hope that they do something like that and not Usman. Don't just plug Usman in there and
We've got a few Jack Della Maddalena. There's loads of guys they could put in.
Jack. Don't. That's
Leon
what I was going to
Edwards
say.
back in.
That's fine, but Della Maddalena would be my choice. I'm why not? Throw him in there, man. Throw him in there. Like it's such a momentum's colliding type thing. Ian Gary would do the same thing, but preserve him. I think throw Maddalena in there, and then Ian can sort it out. When everybody's ready.
Well, look at that. He does it all. Boxing, MMA, on the spot. Chuck Mindenhall always delivers. Chuck, that was an absolute pleasure, mate. I honestly could have talked to you for another hour about that fight.
Oh, it's all those old boxing things are the greatest ever, man. I should pay more attention to today's boxing. I'm starting to get back more into it, obviously with Uncrowned, but it's been kind of a gradual re-accessing, like, you know what I mean? Like kind of getting back into it, but we're kind of in a little bit of a golden era again, I think. So
look,
it's
long
good.
live boxing, long live Jerry Eisenberg, and long live Chuck Mindenhall. Thank you so much once again, Chuck.
All right, brother.
The great Chuck Mindenhall. I know I nerded out there big time. I'd like to think me and Chuck were nerding out big time. Honestly, if you're a reader, go and read Norman Mailer, The Fight. It will make you want to be a sports journalist, as it evidently did for me and Chuck. Chuck's probably pulled it off a bit better than me, to be fair to him. And if you're not into books, go and watch When We Were Kings. Probably the greatest sports documentary ever made. I think it won an Oscar. And again, all these characters we're talking about, Mailer, George Plimpton, they're all in this, giving their first-hand accounts of this. Much of the stuff we're talking about during that conversation is in When We Were Kings. Just a brilliant, brilliant fight. I honestly could have talked to Chuck for an hour about it. As I said, and not to belittle the next guest, because I absolutely love these guys. I've been covering these guys for a very, very long time. And I'm just so happy to see, the pioneer of Welsh MMA, a guy who has meant so much to that scene and continues to mean so much to that scene. Richard Shaky Shore, in remission, healthy again. We were all very worried when we got the news. We probably got the news late 2022 or early 2023. I'd say late 2022 that he had got a cancer diagnosis. He's been through chemo, been through radiotherapy. I have an article coming out about it on Uncrowned over the weekend, where he really delved into it, and I appreciate that so much. Such a personal thing to talk about, but so good to see him so healthy, back to himself, absolutely buzzing. I know I was talking about the Jack Shore underdog thing. It did suddenly occur to me that against Brito he was an underdog. Against Ricky Simone, his last bantamweight fight, he was an underdog. But I don't know, dude. The pedigree of Jack Shore is overlooked by a lot of people. Like, this guy has been doing this a long, long time, and he hasn't lost an awful lot. I think Ricky Simone and Brito are the only fights he's ever lost. Certainly as a professional. And really the Brito one, which we'll get into, I'm sure, was controversial because it was stopped because of a leg cut. And look, Richard and Jack aren't saying like, oh, I was about to win the fight. It was a tough fight. Brito's a beast. He was chopping his legs through, but everyone I talked to, like fighters, coaches at the time, were like, well, that's the way you'd have to fight Brito. Like, you would have to let him exert himself in a furious manner over the first 2 rounds of the fight and hope you can just pour it on the third. And honestly, Jack was surviving, and that's a tough thing to do against Brito. And you could see Brito starting to wrestle, and you were like, maybe this could turn. Unfortunately, the doctor stopped it. Richard was incensed. Like, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Shaky as angry as he was after that fight. He's calmed down now, I think. But just a great duo. The most iconic duo in Welsh MMA history. Here is Jack Shore, who takes on Youssef Zalal in Edmonton, and his father, the legend, Richard Shaky Shore. I am now joined by the most iconic duo in the history of Welsh martial arts. Two legends of their own right, Richard Shaky Shore and his fantastic son Jack, who is fighting Youssef Zalal in Edmonton this weekend. Lads, an absolute pleasure. You have always been on my shows. It's great to finally get you here on the Uncrowned network. ArielHelwani even texted me to say he's absolutely buzzing to hear what you guys have to say this week. So very happy to have you here.
Our pleasure, buddy. Always happy to have a chat with our favourite Irish journalist, mate.
Is there any other? I'm only missed.
Favourite journalist, now mine favourite journalist. Yeah, I'll have all of my flags. Stevenson will be on the DMs now asking what I'm talking about.
Good old Andy Stevenson. Jack, first of all, I spoke to your dad yesterday. We have a feature coming out about his amazing journey with cancer, his remission, all this stuff. But before we get into this fight and everything like that, I wanted to ask you, what is your take on Edmonton, Canada? Because Shaky didn't exactly pull any punches. We don't have this part of it recorded, thank God, but a few criticisms, to say the least, from Shaky yesterday.
Yeah, it's all right. It's a nice little... You've got to bear in mind that the only places he like is Larry and Temby, so you never once had anything good to say about anywhere we've ever travelled to. So bear that... You've got to bear that in mind when you're asking him. Dublin was all right. You've got to bear that in mind when you're asking him for his point of view on the city. But no, it's all right. Couple of shady characters hanging about the bus stops and the street corners. Every 100 yards, you've got to step over a junkie. But yeah, no, it's a nice... It looks nice, doesn't it? It looks nice, but don't look down. Tripping over junkies, picking up fag ends.
Oh my God. I was actually thinking about this, Jack, because your son is a year old, right? And most of your fights happen in the UK. And now suddenly they're doing the Jack Shore World Tour as soon as this happens. Unbelievable, right?
Every time, without fail. Yeah, Brazil and then Canada. Well, it's mad because when we got matched, and then us being like, oh, Canada's not too far away. It's like one flight. And it was fucking quicker for us to get to Brazil. And that was a 12-hour flight. So, yeah, we're having a bit of a run round. But at least we get to see the world a little bit, I suppose.
It's you bring up Brazil, and I don't want to mention the war because, again, previous conversation with Shaky, he got all kinds of worked up. I mean, we took a 15-minute interlude from what we were talking about just so he could air his grievances on the Brito fight. But, you know, like there's a lot of substance to the argument here. That cut on your leg, the doctor fingering the wound in your leg and then deciding, you know, we have to call this fight off. And I agree with your dad. Like, he's kind of saying, I've never seen a fight stopped on a leg cut before. You looked... I watched the fight back today now when I was going to speak to you. You look absolutely like, I cannot believe this is happening. You're walking around aimlessly like, surely this isn't the end of this fight. How hard is it to get over something like that? Because Brito, obviously a fantastic fighter. And when I was speaking to coaches and fighters after this fight, they were like, this is the only way you can fight Brito. You've got to let him exhaust himself. You seem to be doing that. He's starting to wrestle you or attempting to wrestle you when the referee stops the fight. How annoying was that, considering the travel, considering everything you guys had been through to get to that point?
Yeah, it was really annoying. Obviously, you're out of the cage. You get matched up with a guy like Brito, who's a big, scary, dangerous motherfucker. And it's like, right, so you go in there, you go into his back garden, and like we never ever once claimed that, oh, I was fucking dominating the fight and they stopped it and robbed us. But the game plan, as we keep saying to everyone, was like you said, you can't fight him head on and meet him in the middle. The people who've tried to do that, Andre Feely and all that, they've been clipped and put out. You can't do it. You've got to sucker him in and let him tire himself out. And when we watched all his footage, we knew that when he gets tired, he defaults and starts to wrestle. And I know I've got really, really good takedown defense. So that almost was the plan, to let that play into my field, because the more he tries to wrestle, the harder it's going to be him to take me down, the more tired he's going to get. And he was starting to do that. And when they stopped the fight, I didn't realize my leg was cut, to be honest. He was leaning on me on the cage, and I seen the blood, and I thought, oh, perhaps I must have clipped him on the way in and cut his eye, cut his cheek, whatever. And then they stopped, and I looked down like, oh, my leg's bleeding. So I just expected the doctor to come in, check it, and be like, yeah, all good. Especially some of the cuts you see, on eyebrows and stuff like that they let the fight carry on with. And I don't speak Portuguese, but I can see that they're on about calling the fight off. And like, me and him are going off. I'm like, no, I'm right. And then they start saying, it's fractured. I'm like, well, how can it be fractured? I'm walking on it. You know what I mean? I'm walking, I'm fighting normal. And then after the fight, they walked us out the back. They're like insisting on person is in a fucking wheelchair that we didn't need. It was just frustrating, especially to have all that time out to come back. And I felt good going in there to then sort of get our game plan finally going in the second round. And then just to have the rug pulled from under. It was a tough one to get over. It took me a good couple of weeks, couple of months, to be honest. It was a weird result because it's a loss, but it's like, I don't know how you approach it. I don't know what you do mentally. I've never had to overcome anything like that mentally, because it was like it's a loss, but it didn't feel like a loss at the same time.
Right. And Shaky, so they come to you with this fight in Edmonton. Is there any part of you kind of thinking, I don't necessarily want to fight outside of, the UK or somewhere close, given what happened in Brazil? Was there any reluctance on your part?
Listen, you look back through Jack's in the UFC, we have never, ever turned a fight down. We've never once declined an opponent. And if you have a look at his CV of fighters that we've arranged to fight, the fights that haven't even, Umar Nurmagomedov, we signed on that one, that fell through. We had where was the fight when we had 4 opponents in 9 days?
Fight Island,
we had 4 opponents in 9 days. We signed for everyone. We signed for an opponent on the day before we flew. On the connection, when we've got off the flight.
That was Vegas.
Yes, I've checked the email. This guy's pulled out. They've offered us another one. We've took that, and when we landed in Vegas, we had another opponent, and we've always fought anyone. So, to be honest, mate, I just think, as Jack has said in another interview, he's fighting a Brazilian in Brazil with a Brazilian referee that I've never seen, before. I thought his inexperience cost us a fight, and a Brazilian doctor. I sent a letter of off to the commission, not asking them to overturn the result or appeal it, but just want to have some accountability for the way the fight was stopped, and just a load of bullshit back off them saying, that doctor's experienced and he felt the shin was fractured, and that was the end of the matter. But now we're going to issue Canada. We've been to Canada before with Marshman. It was a different opponent. We had a different opponent originally. Again, an undefeated fighter. That one fell through. We took Zalal as well then straight away as well. So it's a good fight. It's a tough fight as well. I think it's a really good fight. They match up well. But listen, we've been everywhere, haven't we? We had a show in London a few years back, 1 week, and they sent us to Long Island in New York the following week, which didn't make any sense to us. But we don't complain. We just get on with it, Pete,
Yeah. And look, there wasn't anything wrong with that leg, right? Like when you guys went to the doctor outside of a cut leg, there was nothing, right?
No, yeah.
Four stitches and sent back to the hotel.
4 stitches and a bit of swelling, which 9 times out of 10, everyone's kicking a calf feet. Like,
yeah, everybody's wondering after a fight.
9 out of 10 fights these days. I always come out of fights with banged up shins and feet and legs. So within 2-3 weeks, I was back in the gym, obviously working around the healing of the cut because of where it was, but there was no issue walking or anything like that. Within a week, I was back to normal.
I'm interested. Who was the most irritable that night when you're unwinding the 2 Shore boys? Who was?
Did he not at the end?
Yes, he did. He looked straight at you, Shaky.
Honest to God,
I had to be restrained, kids. Genuinely, because I was off. I don't know. I flew off.
Parker, my other coach, said to me, was saying to him, "Shit, you've got to fucking calm down because we're gonna get in fucking trouble by you." was in the room. I don't go on Twitter no more because I just don't like Twitter.
Nobody likes Twitter, Jack. Nobody.
Me 50,000 tweets. Oh, so and so said this, and so I was like, I don't care. I don't care. He's just off the fucking wall for about 3 days.
Yeah. I'm all right now.
Was he shit talking you at some stage in there, Shaky? There was a part in the first round where Cormier's commentating, and he actually said,
the fucking word he said. He said something. I don't think it was. People think it was us, but it was somebody behind us that he shouted to in Portuguese, and I think people assumed they were talking to the corner team, but it definitely wasn't, because he wasn't making eye contact with us. It was eye contact with somebody behind us. I couldn't fathom out what the idiot was doing, to be honest.
It's funny you mentioned the thing about not wanting to fight a Brazilian in Brazil, because that is everyone's, like, that is what everyone says. And even as this fight is happening, Cormier is saying this. He's like, I don't know if I'd want to come in and fight a Brazilian in Brazil.
Listen, if that role was reversed, would they have stopped that fight if Brito had a cut shit? I'll categorically tell you, not in a million years would that fight have been stopped if the injury was reversed. Not a chance.
I just wanted to see you on that Manchester card, and I don't know how you felt about that, guys, because...
No, we couldn't do that one. What was the reason we couldn't do that one?
It was my son's birthday there, 2 or 3 days before.
Yeah, it was his son's first birthday, and I think it's a big thing. I always say, Pete, you've got to have the balance right. And, you know, I wouldn't want him missing his son's first birthday. You know, it's a big deal for me. So that's why we ended up just moving a little bit further on into the year.
I wouldn't say you're all too disappointed that you didn't fight there, because I was there, obviously, for the fight, and I've never seen a crowd so dead in my life. Like, I mean, Paddy had a big explosion. They got up for Tom, like, as in that you could feel them trying to get up for Tom, and they gave him a massive ovation. But by the time main event started, lads were falling asleep.
There was a video, wasn't there? They done like a collage of images around the venue during the main event, and it was hundreds of people sleeping. You know, it's like, I understand they've got to earn money in the pay-per-view and all the rest of it, but come on, they're not making the Saudis fight in the middle of the night, are they? You know, and I just think it ruined the experience for everybody, because, you know, they're giving you eye masks, they're giving you earplugs, you're trying to sleep during the day. It's impossible. It's a hotel. It's constant noise going on. Fortunately for us with Oban, he was one of the first fights, so I think we fought like 11:45 p.m., which isn't too bad. But I honestly think Leon's performance was jaded because of the time of the night that he had to fight, to be honest.
I seen Aspinall do an interview. It might have been with Ariel, actually, and I think he said something along the lines, he tried to get on the sleep schedule a week and just found it impossible. And I think he said fight day, because of nerves and stuff, he woke up at like 8 a.m. So he said by the time he fought, he'd been awake. Like, he tried to nap. Like, you know, it's like fight day when your adrenaline's going. I think he said he was at like 18, 19 hours by the time he was making the walk to the cage. And obviously, it didn't affect his performance. But he said, had it gone into the later rounds, who's to say that wouldn't have played a factor?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous idea, if I'm honest. Yeah,
like the fights that you've had in London, the magical nights, it's all taking place at local time, and that adds to
it. Usman and Leon was a pay-per-view, and they done that UK time, and I just think it's a shit on the UK fans as well. You know what I mean? You know, they come to the UK once, twice a year, and all of a sudden, then if you're watching it at home, you've got to wait up until 5 a.m. and it must be an honourable experience for some of them supporters in our arena. I was expecting a lot of trouble, to be honest. I thought it was a bad idea. You know, the British culture is like everybody drinking all day, narcotics flying around, and then you know, as it was, I don't think there was much trouble. Was there? No trouble. I didn't see any trouble, but
it was in bed.
It was. I just think it was a really bad call by the UFC to do it at that time.
Yeah, I think the reason why there wasn't trouble is like what Jack's saying. I think people were ready for bed. Like, honestly, they were leaving. Like, I need to go asleep now. Shaky, what is your scouting report on Youssef Zalal? I want to hear it.
Man, he's good everywhere. He's a really neat and tidy kickboxer. He's got decent takedowns. His last few fights, he's won by submission, but I think predominantly we'd probably think he'll probably come and strike a little bit more due to Jack's wrestling pedigree. But no, he's a good well-rounded. He's got a decision loss against the champ, isn't he? I know it was short notice and all the rest of it, but he comes from that, his factory ethical, really, really well established, one of the best teams in the world. So under no illusions, this is like a 50-50 fight, but it's the UFC and how they match him lately, they're all 50-50 fights. We don't get no gimmies. That's one thing we've never had in his UFC career. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. You know, we've seen a couple of his interviews. He's a respectful kid, in fairness. He's talking respectfully about us and Jack and the team. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good match. I think it's a really good. I think it's one of them fights for both lads where you'll probably be looking at a top 15. The winner would be looking at the top 15 opponent next.
I've seen some people, Jack, online talking about, oh, this guy's got some great rear naked chokes. And I'm like, do you know who this guy is fighting? Do you know who Jack Shore is? I mean, have you been impressed by his rear naked choke game as a master of the submission yourself?
Yeah, no, look, he's I say I wouldn't class him as like a grappler, but he's one of the, you know, like some of these guys, they got like not a one trick pony, but they got that one move that they specialize in. And his seems to be, it's a takedown. The guy gives up their back and he's lightning quick. Again, he hooks in and jump in the back. And when he does get it back, more often than not, there's a finish. So, yeah, his setups are really good. I think
something we've looked at.
Yeah, how he sets it up and does it is a little bit different. Well, how I do it. But, no, he's very slick with it. You know, you don't really want to give him an opportunity because he's got those long limbs as well. He's a lanky guy. And they're always tough when they get the body triangle, get the back. It is tough to shift. I mean, if they don't get the finish, it can be a bit of a nightmare position. So he's very good. Yeah, he's good. He's good in that area.
What's the return to featherweight been like? How's the feeling there with these guys? Obviously, you're absolutely surging at bantamweight. We're over here now. We have the Brito fight, which we've discussed. But how does it feel? Like, does it feel like much of a difference for you?
Physically, I mean, like, a lot of my sparring partners are featherweights and lightweights anyway. So, like, physically, doesn't. I just feel in myself, I'm a lot stronger. I'm a lot healthier at the weight. Whereas when I was down at bantamweight, my entire camp was just focused around making weight. I was having to run in the morning, run before sparring, run after. So every sparring session I was going into, I was depleted and compromised. Whereas now I'm going into a sparring session, doing my fight simulation rounds where I'm fully filled and feel fit, strong, and happy. And I just think if moving me up a level, you know, like MMA fans can be a little bit fickle. Like, I lost a Brito and all of a sudden everyone's saying, oh, he needs to go back to bantamweight, he's too small for featherweight. Yet when I beat Mac one a year before, and when I beat Mac one, I hadn't put on the muscle and stuff that I had now. When I beat Mac, it's a great move for his career, looks more better than ever featherweight. But yeah, I feel brilliant. I
mean, he's not a small. I don't know where they get it.
He's a massive bantamweight. Fucking massive.
But he's a decent sized featherweight. We're matching up, you know, with sizing up some of the guys in the hotel. Tell about
I'm
Charles
sure he
Jourdain.
won't mind me saying it. Me and Charles Jourdain are quite friendly, and I seen him fight. And last time I seen him when I fought Ricky Simone, we both fought on the same card, and he comes, he's like, "Oh, we've swapped weights," and he just looks me up and down and goes, "You were bigger than me when you was a bantamweight." He's like, "Oh, why the fuck do I ever go to bantamweight for?" And then we seen him again in the workout room last night, and he's like, grabbed me, and I was like, "Yeah, you should never have been a bantamweight." So yeah,
like, we checked in with the weight, 159 pounds. You know, that's not a small featherweight on fight week. You know, it's 15 pound to cut ready for the bout. Like,
sounds like you need to move to lightweight if anything, Jack.
I tell people, like, the amount of weight I used to have to shift fight week for bantamweight, it was just an horrendous 5 days.
We would walk back in excess of 155 on a bantamweight bout.
I can remember seeing you and like talking to you guys a lot before I went to see you fight in Cardiff against Ekindeo. And I can remember that weight cut, and I was like, holy shit, like, you guys were like rushing out of the places, like, fuck, we need to get this guy wrapped in cotton wool basically for tomorrow. Yeah. So it was no surprise to me that you had to move up, you know.
And that was, what was that, like 6 years ago?
Yes.
I was 23, 24.
23, yeah.
I mean, now I'm 29, pushing 30. As you get older, you naturally get bigger, and weight becomes harder to shift. You know what I mean? It's not. I think we always sort of knew it was coming. It was just a case of when it was going to happen.
I would have done it, and he'll tell you this, probably 3 fights before he did. I was at him constantly, and but like he always says in the interviews, it's easy to forget how horrific the cut was when you keep winning. And I think, like, after the Simone fight, I think, and we're not knocking it, you know, Ricky won it famously, but the weight cut was horrific. When the trip was horrific to New York, everything about the hotel was wrong. Everything was off, and I think that impacted on his performance. You know, the weight cut was taking so much out of it. It was impacting. So then he's done all the testing, and like when he's gone up and done what do you call the DEXA scans and the blood test, they're like, mate, you're big for a featherweight. You're going to end up dying one day making these cuts. And that was the words, wasn't it? You're going to end up, your kidneys are going to fail, something's going to go radically wrong. So I needed them to say that, because I've been looking for 3 fights saying we need to move up. You know, I see how he sizes up against these guys. But I think it's the right move. And I think on Saturday, I think everyone will appreciate just how good he is now, because Mach 1 was our first one. We didn't have a lot of time to really prepare. We've done a lot of work with Paul Reed up in Liverpool around like his body composition, muscle mass, his diet, and Paul's done a brilliant job of an ear.
Yeah.
You know, he's filled up into a really strong, powerful featherweight now.
As a dad, does it, like, you know, Richard was just mentioning life balance. As a dad now as well, you know,
much easier trip for me. I don't enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I want to enjoy it. I don't like him cutting weight with featherweight and watching him fight. I'll be relieved when the fight's over. But the bantamweight was great. And I said, you know, there's a couple of times I said, I can't keep doing this, son. I can't keep watching you go through what you go through to make that weight. And a couple of times I've said to like a couple of lads in the gym, I just can't do it. I can't do it no more. And then when he's moved up, it is a lot more comfortable. His mood is much better. Like at bantamweight, you wouldn't leave the room with him. He'd just be curled up on the bed all day for the entire week. We're walking yesterday, stopped at a coffee shop, had a drink. It's night and day, the preparation for the fight. You know, it's how a fighter should be preparing for a fight. Is getting ready, honing the skills, a little bit of weight to cut, rather than just killing yourself day in, day out over the last couple of weeks to make sure you hit that 136 pounds.
And you with like Fraser as well, Jack, like you probably get to, you know, you're probably a lot more active than you used to be as a bantamweight. Like you get to basically enjoy his time right up until you have to leave it this way. Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. You know, like for the last, like when I was at bantam, the last, like, I don't know, 4-6 weeks of camp, it's a grind. Every single day, I'm waking up and just repeating the process. Like when you got a little 1-year-old running around the house, you know, you don't want to be in a frame of mind where you think, well, I've got to get home from the gym and rest and do nothing now until the next session because you're that exhausted. Whereas it's just giving me like a new lease of life with training. I enjoy training a lot more. It got to a stage where I just used to dread going into fight camp, whereas now I can, to be honest, now a fight camp and just normal everyday training is a lot different, other than like the intensity of the sparring rounds, and is a bit more structured. Life's just so much better for me now at this new class as a dad, as a fighter, as a person in general. You know what I mean? Life is just so much. Like even I'd have a fight at bantamweight, I'd just be on a timer thinking, like, when are we going to get off of the next fight now? What's my weight? Keep my weight down. It was just like a constant 24/7, 365 on my mind. Whereas now it's just totally different. And I think you look like a lot of the top guys now is going in the same direction. Do you know what I mean? Like you just even look at the top of the division. I know Max Holloway's massive, but like Topuria and Volkanovski, they're not
huge, no.
massive monsters at the weight, but they're physically fit, strong, and healthy, making the weight comfortably, and it's showing in their performances. So I think it's the way forward.
I want to touch on what you just said about him being a father now. Ask him if he'll let his son have a fight.
Jack?
Not a chance. Now he knows what I've had to put up with for the last 20 years.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned the Americani fight, and I know you are probably sick to death talking about this. I only spent a long time speaking to Shaky about it yesterday, but that moment is probably the most emotional I've been watching a fight. When you took to the mic after a brilliant performance, Shaky had called out what essentially led to the finish just before it happened, and it was a very emotional scene. And after speaking to Shaky yesterday, I realized that not a lot of people knew about his cancer diagnosis at that stage. And obviously, as I said, massively emotional. I can remember the outpouring of emotion online afterwards. How good does it feel for you, Jack? Like this, I know he's an MMA legend. I know he's all these things, but he's your dad. How good does it feel to hear that he's in remission now and things are back on course?
Yeah, it's just like as if life went back to normal for a couple of months. It was kind of like, and I know like he was obviously like he caught it early and all that, but when you hear the word cancer, you automatically assume the worst. You automatically worry and panic. Like I didn't want to do that fight. You know, we got the. I think we'd had the okay before Christmas that they were going to put me on the London card, and then we found out about that, and I was like, right, well, I just want to fight until after this is all sorted. And he kind of pushed me. I was like, no, you need. I'd rather you do it. It'll be better for me. It'll give me something to focus my mind on. But like people don't. I'll always see the interview, and I don't think people fully understand. Like, he was generally the first like 3 weeks of January, he was going through chemotherapy. So for me to do a training camp whilst he's literally at the house on death's door, and then even after that, like even after the chemo was done, he was still rough as can be for weeks and months.
Yeah, and radiotherapy then as well.
I mean, I remember seeing him. Like I remember at the time of the fight, I thinking, oh, he seemed a lot better than what he did 2 or 3 months ago. But then when I look back at the pictures from that fight week, he just looks horrendous. He looked even then, like how many weeks had he finished it by then?
No, I finished the week before.
Oh, so he just looked fucking terrible. Do you know what I mean? He looked.
What date was the fight? March. He
was blown up because of the steroids and the treatment and all. Like he just looked not well at all. But for then, obviously, get the news and stuff that right, we're all good, we're all in the clear. It was just like, you can't even put it into words. Really, it was just like because obviously what people don't understand as well is like he's putting on a brave face, but then like I'm not to make it about me, but like, I'm having to deal with my mother and my sister, crying every other day, going up to see my mum and she's crying and panicking, and I'm, then so I got the fight in the back of my head, and I've got to try and keep these on the mental straight and narrow. Then you factor in, it's not just I got worried about him, like he could potentially be fucking dying. Like they could say to us in 12 weeks, this hasn't worked, it's only going to get worse. So it was a lot going on, a lot to take into it, to be honest. But I'm just glad it's all fucking done with.
It must. I mean,
one thing I say, I was proud of how we managed it because, as we said, we kept it quiet. For him to prepare and put on a performance like he did, with psychologically, it must have been a strain, So I'm proud of how we managed that period as well, inside and outside of the gym.
He sent me a video of during that camp. And I can imagine he wasn't always just a ray of sunshine to be dealing with.
Oh, no, he's not a fucking ray of sunshine anyway, let alone when he's in the midst of chemo. It was funny, that video he sent to my camera guy, Joe, caught it on camera. And he said,
didn't know we've been filmed.
And he said, I was filming it, he said, and I was just, he said he was going, and I was petrified that he was going to look at me and be like, are you fucking filming me? He said, I done it so slight. If he catch me now, I might be in the firing line.
It's absolutely brilliant. I know you guys have a lot to do today. I'll let you go just after one more. As ArielHelwani would say, is this going to be a y'all must have forgot moment for Jack Shore on Saturday in Edmonton?
I believe it will be, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Look, like we keep saying, we're under no illusion of how good this guy is. He's very, very good, and all respect to him. He's got some good wins. The guys he lost to have been good, but I genuinely believe I don't get the credit I deserve for the level I'm at, and I think this will be a good, not a coming out party, but it'll be a good chance to remind people that you know what, he is as good as they used to say he is.
And I fucking know you are, Jack Shore. Richard and Jack, two legends. I love the both of you. Have a great time over there. Stay away from those lads messing with needles around Edmonton, all right? And everything will be fine. Best of luck, and thank you so much for coming on, lads.
No problem. Thanks, Pete. Cheers, buddy. Catch you soon, pal.
Get to your shops now, lads. Thanks very much. That was brilliant.
Top man, Pete.
See you soon. There they were, the legends, the Shores. Incredible. I mean, what about that story about... I knew Shaky was angry. I didn't know he had to be physically restrained by another one of the coaches. Great crack with the lads. Look, it's a pressure situation for Jack, and he seems as cool as the other side of the pillow. I actually think it is very funny. He makes a great point. After Amir Khani and the brilliant win that he had there, everybody was like, wow, Jack should have moved to featherweight, years ago. And then the Brito fight happens again, ended in a controversial way. And everyone's like, oh, he needs to go back down to bantamweight. It's he's right. It's a fickle sport at the best of times, let's be honest. I teased at the top. Jack Shore is my underdog of the week. Come on. Of course he is. Can he continue the winning run of crack guests? I mean, this is going to be some crack, boys. If this keeps happening, I'll have a queue out the door with people trying to get on. Chuck's going to win whatever the hell he's competing in this weekend. I can assure you of that. Yeah, so that's the episode for this week. Jack Shore is our underdog of the week. Enjoy UFC Edmonton. The lads did a great job of breaking it all down yesterday. GC, the man, the fast hand with the bets, as always. But it's a really good card. I'm looking forward to watching it. All of the crackheads, I will see you next Friday. Please check us out again. We are loving the fun we're having here. Big thank you to the great Oscar Losef. Big thank you to the great Frank, Mysterious Frank, that is. And Jordan. I mean, on air Jordan. Are you seeing all of this beautiful stuff he's doing with this? This is just me sitting in my office talking shite. And he turns it into a piece of art every week. Shout out Anton Evans. What's this Antoine stuff about? I saw he made a comment, the British thing. Come on, mate. It's not a good game to play with the Irish people. You know this. Just because you're a unit, you think you can do this, right? Just because you're on steroids and are juiced out of your mind now, you feel like you can talk down to me. It's terrible, but I love you too. Thank you to Ariel. Thank you to all the boys. See you next week. Enjoy the fights.